Welcome to the show Perspective, and I'm your host Sana Maqbool. And in today's show, we will be taking a review at Pakistan's foreign policy in light of the recent developments that have been taking place. And we will be focusing on three countries, namely India, Afghanistan, and we'll touch upon Iran as well. We know that last week, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, along with the DG ISPR, Major General Babar Iftikhar, in a press conference talked about irrefutable evidence regarding India's plans to destabilize Pakistan and also threaten regional peace and security. We know that a lot of evidence was presented in terms of names and money trails and evidence regarding India's sponsoring of terrorism in Pakistan, not only using its own soil, but also that of Afghanistan and neighboring countries. So we will talk more about this evidence in detail and consider the fact that how this is affecting Pakistan-India relations and the larger regional context. We will also be taking a look at Prime Minister Imran Khan's recent visit to Kabul and the developments that have taken place, specifically with regards to the Afghan peace process and what can happen in the future with regards to the mistrust that has continued to exist between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, how to move forward with that. We'll also touch upon the visit of the Iranian foreign minister this month earlier, where we know that Javad Zarif was in Pakistan along with the Iranian special envoy on Afghanistan. And we'll discuss in further detail that in a time when we know that the administration in the US is going to change, what are the future implications on the relationship that we can have with Iran, and of course with regards to our relations with US and Saudi Arabia, what sort of a balance can we hope to achieve? To just have a discussion on these topics, we have been joined by our guests. Firstly, in the studio, we have been joined by security analyst Professor Zamir Ahmed Awan. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. We've also been joined by foreign affairs expert Mr. Sarfraz Ahmed Rana. Thank you for being with us. And we've also been joined by Skype by the former Defense Minister, Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodi. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us.
Pleasure.
I'll start with you, Mr. Naeem Khalid Lodi. We earlier we're going to discuss the regional interpretations and security implications surrounding India, Afghanistan and Iran. But starting off with India, first of all, we know that last week we did present a dossier of irrefutable evidence, and the fact that India has been committing ceasefire violations or has been involved in terrorist activities in Pakistan is not something which is coming in the forefront now. It's been there before also. It's not something new. It's been there. But we know that the kind of evidence that has been presented this time around contains a lot more concrete evidence and facts. Do you think that this particular dossier is going to sit well with the international community in general, and perhaps they will not be quiet this time around as to what India has been doing for a while now?
Thank you very much. As you said yourself, I think this is well known that whatever has been presented in this dossier in a more cogent manner, in a more, I would say, in a manner which is prosecutable evidence, it was known because the National Security Advisor had openly said that we will not allow CPEC to take shape, and he even said that we have kept about $500 million for that. And now we have the details of those dollars also, how they were distributed and all that. Their Prime Minister has been saying openly that people of Gilgit-Baltistan and Balochistan are calling us and we are in touch with them and this and that. And also I would hastily add that even the world at large was not totally oblivious whatever was being done. But of course, everything requires proper evidence. And now I think we must appreciate our intelligence agencies and also our Foreign Office, the way it has been presented. Now it is a real prosecutable evidence, which can be, of course, which I am sure by the time we are talking, it is already there in UN. It must already be there in P5 countries and some other countries that matter. But I thought I've seen that evidence, and we have all seen it. It still requires some more legal rendering, I would say, to make it a proper, lawsuits or whatever. So we need to go to human rights platforms. We need to go to counter-terrorism platforms, and then this would be quite convincing, whatever has been presented. But after having said that, if we think that because of this, the countries will leave their main interest, stop pursuing their interest, and start pressurizing India to an extent that where they will change their behavior, I have my doubts about that. However, the
Right.
international community, the international media, the neutral platforms like Human Rights Watch, and they will put a lot of pressure. But whether any such pressure has done anything to countries like like Israel or like other countries who've been perpetrating atrocities on other people, uh, that is a matter of question, and we can discuss it later. So I think the evidence is good. It will have an effect. How the governments are likely to react is nearly known. Yes, it will give more credence to our narrative, generally in the people of the world.
Right, Mr. Doti, and you rightly said, of course, that India and along with other countries in the world seem to be enjoying some sort of impunity for a long while now, and we've seen that perhaps the international response has not been as tangible as one would hope on such matters. And another fact, of course, also remains that we also witness ceasefire violations along the line of control almost every other day. And we know that our response has always been that of a responsible state, where we do register our
Right.
protest with the Indian side. We do ask for investigations to take place of that particular incident and the other as well. But then again, of course, it's happened so much now that it's become more of a norm, that this is some sort of pattern that we have found ourselves involved in as well. Considering that, how does Pakistan still be able to maintain its credibility as a responsible state and is also able to protect its own interests?
You see, maintaining credibility is good, and good, I think, in the sense of in the field of diplomacy, it's all right to be a good boy, to be known everywhere that they are responsible. But then, what do you get in return? I mean, for example, how much we have, although you have kept this topic a little later about the Afghanistan, how much have we actually helped the world and the and even Americans to bring about peace, or at least to bring about some semblance of peace in Afghanistan, and all the talk, and what have we got in return? We couldn't even ask Americans to ask Indians to uh, at least reduce the level of atrocities in Kashmir. We haven't been able to do that. So that it is not that there was anything wanting in our diplomacy. It is this is how the world order is. So I would say that it is not enough to work in the diplomatic domain. We have to now we have started the lawfare domain, which is good. We have to also work in the political domain, and we also have to work in the military domain. Unless
Right.
we have a very balanced approach in all these domains and do not remain defensive and passive and have some proper cogent attitude, probably the things will not improve.
Right. Mr. Zamir, of course, at the end of the day, even if we do not get the response from the international community in a way that it should respond and that we should be getting, um, still, Pakistan's security concerns are present and they remain, even if the world is listening or not. So, at the end of the day, when we do know that there are plans by the Indian side, there's always been there to destabilize Pakistan. There were evidences of attacks planned for this month and the next this year. Considering all of this, what options does Pakistan have at the end of the day if we keep knocking on the door of the international community and the United Nations and get no response? Where does that leave us with?
Let me explain the background first.
Okay.
In fact, India was using the name of largest democracy and the secular state, and they were defaming Pakistan internationally. They were blaming Pakistan for terrorism, extremism, and all sort of the evils. They have distorted the Pakistan image in the international community. But recently, we have noticed in the international community, especially in the international media, we have seen that there are sentiments against India. The leading newspaper in the America, New York Times, Washington Post, The Guardian, and different channels also are highlighting the Indian issues, like their atrocities in Kashmir, their National Citizen Act, and their treatment toward their minorities. So India's reputation or India's true face has been exposed. And this dossier, what we have presented now, our Foreign Minister and the DGISPR, I think is a concrete step toward exposing India exactly what they are. And now the international community will realize the Indian ugly face is exposed and they are no longer a largest democracy or the secular state. They cannot hide behind these slogans.
Well, that of course is the hope. We know that in the press conference, Mr. Shah Mahmood Qureshi also spoke about the fact that he now thinks that it's no longer in the interest of Pakistan that we remain silenced on these issues. My question to you, Mr. Sarfraz, would be considering the fact that this has been going on for so long, was it always at any point in our interest that we remain silenced on this? Why was this evidence not shared before? What sort of foreign policy perspectives or factors do we take into account when we make such decisions?
Yeah, well, this is what do we expect from our enemy? Of course, they will try to damage Pakistan's reputation and credibility whatever way possible, right? So this is not something new. I mean, this is at least not new to me, because we have seen there is a report published in BBC way back in 2015 in which they have basically established a link that how India was funding at that time, by that time, the MQM, right? And even the current Prime Minister of India, he confessed in 1971 that how he was being part of, cutting Pakistan into two pieces, and, Pakistan, he played a very active role, the current Prime Minister. So, of course, now we have the proofs, as General Lodi said, and he also said that, the proofs are quite convincing. Now it is a matter of, how Pakistan project itself. So that was the main problem always, that Pakistan remained, as you said, remained passive, and Pakistan was not able to project itself in a way that it should be projected. So it is now a matter of how Pakistan is going to project those evidences at international stage. The other very important thing, the recently in India, what really happened, that there was a report that basically tried to made some establish some links between India, and the Indian banks were involved in money laundering. And now there are another dossier which Pakistan is going to present to the international community as well. So there is another important thing, and Pakistan's case is very concrete, and Pakistan now has to convey these concerns to FATF as well, Financial Action Task Force,
right,
that how India is trying to get involved in subversive activity, and Pakistan, how to India is basically trying to destabilize Pakistan through these activities.
Right, absolutely. Which brings me to the fact that, of course, the way that you've spoken about the fact that Pakistan maybe perhaps has had a problem of projecting this. And this has been a discussion for a while now, that the narrative that we're giving to the international community needs to be presented perhaps in a different strategy, packaged in a different way. And we also need to take into account who we're targeting. The international opinion is of great importance here. And of course, as you mentioned, Mr. Zamir Saab, that when we look at the Indian diaspora, there's also a number of people there who may be sympathetic towards the fact that this is not something that India should be doing. Mr. Lodi, my question to you would be, considering the fact that we need these strategies to be able to access areas, diplomats, people at large, to make sure that we change their opinions and gain the ground that we need to establish the fact that this is what's happening and it needs to stop. What do you think seems to be lacking in the way Pakistan's developed its strategy of putting this narrative forward?
I think, as the brothers were saying, that the first thing is that it's the first time probably that we have converted into a shape where it is more acceptable as a legal instrument. And I also added that we need to make it even more legalized and brought under, because once you talk of UN, so then you have to refer to the UN articles and various conventions. That will be done as far as UN is concerned. Once we go to P5 countries, then each country, they must be having certain rules, regulations. Accordingly, we have to render it that way. That is one that we are doing for the first time. But as I said, that for example, in the political arena, we have done one thing. The first big step, that we have decided to give a temporary status of province to Gilgit-Baltistan. Now, this is a political move. Similarly, we can do something with Azad Kashmir, the remaining Azad Kashmir. We can, for example, have a government in exile. Uh, we can ask UN to have a partial plebiscite in the areas where it is possible, and later on it can be extended. We can say that because India has violated the Simla agreement, so it is no more there. So such like political things we have not yet worked much in that direction. The other is, once I say military things, it doesn't mean necessarily that we wage a war on India, because we know that two nuclear powers cannot go to war, open war.
Right.
But whatever is India doing to us, which is very well reflected in this folder, after telling the world, I think we have a right to do the same to them. After all, we have been bearing all this for such a long time. So once I said earlier also that we should not remain passive and we should not remain defensive. I think after informing the world that this is what they are doing, we will have all the right to do everything whatever they are doing to us. I think this is lacking. Whatever I said in the political arena, that is lacking, and we have to stand up. And once your brothers and your sisters are being mishandled, and whatever is happening in Kashmir, so you don't ask your neighbors and your people of the town that come on, see what is happening to them. First, you have to do something yourself, because they will ask you, what have you done about giving the relief. And there are UN resolutions. For example, one that comes to my mind is 3324, which says that occupied people can take up arms against the occupation forces, and other countries can help them in all possible manners in that resistance. So that
Right.
UN article is there. So we need to explore everything. That is what I was saying, a
Right,
whole
and
of
that's
nation
extremely
approach,
important
and
because
not in
that
bits
goes
and
against
pieces.
India's narrative of the freedom fighters being terrorists.
Right. That I think we must appreciate that our diplomacy and foreign office has done two very good things. One, that they have made the Kashmir problem known the world over. There's no doubt about it. We know that the things are being published in international newspapers, and what is coming from UK Parliament and European Union Parliament and human rights, platforms and all that. So this is one thing. And secondly, I think now the world will never get into this ruse, Indian ruse, that those who are fighting for their freedom are terrorists. So these two great achievements I must assign to our foreign office. But from
Right.
now, from here onward, we have to move further in the areas which I just indicated.
Right, and Pakistan has been making a lot of effort in this regard. You're absolutely right on that. This brings me to Afghanistan also, considering the fact that one of the things that's also shown from the press conference was the fact that, of course, we have problems coming in from Afghanistan soil being used against us for a long time. And we have evidence that India has been doing that in the past as well, and is currently also engaged in such activities from the Indian embassy in Afghanistan. Considering these facts and the fact that there is a deep mistrust that has existed between Pakistan and Afghanistan for a while now because of these issues and because of other border issues as well. How much importance do you think this conversation holds? The fact that Afghanistan's soil need not be used against us, and this is important not just for our security and peace, but also for peace and stability in the region. When we talk about Pakistan-Afghanistan relations and Prime Minister's visit to Kabul, how significant do you think this conversation is going to be?
I think the timings of this visit and the level of this visit is very important. And as far as removing the mistrust is concerned, it just remind me one Urdu verse which says that "Dilon ki uljhne बढ़ती रहेंगी अगर कुछ मशवरे बाहम ना होंगे." You need to talk, you need to meet, and do not rely on third-party sources, because the classic way of using false flag operation is that A does something to B and assigns it to C, the third party. So somebody else doing something to Pakistan, or doing something to Afghanistan, and Afghanistan and Pakistan, pointing fingers at each other. This must stop. And such visits, they go a long way in alleviating such misgivings. So I think that was an extraordinary move by Prime Minister, and very well timed. You must have seen that other Afghan factions have also been meeting Prime Minister. You know that the Taliban came and
There
met
have been
Prime
many
Minister.
visits in the preceding
Abdullah
months,
Abdullah
yes.
came and met Prime Minister, and
Right.
Engineer Hikmat Tayar, and also all these. So this is the right way. Probably people-to-people contact must improve, leadership contact must improve, and this mistrust has to be removed. And we need to understand that we should not allow other players to play any part, bad part in the relationship of the two countries. The moment we understand that, I think the things will improve a lot.
Right, and of course, you're right, this is a crucial time also for this visit to take place. And this is Prime Minister's first visit to Afghanistan since assuming office. And Pakistan's role as a facilitator in the Afghan peace process has come out in the international community. The US has acknowledged it, the world has acknowledged it, and we have played a very important role in the Afghan peace process. But now we know that, of course, the interactions between the Afghan government and the Taliban have been stalled, and the hostilities continues to rise. And even though the Prime Minister has called for this to an end and to work towards a ceasefire, what more can Pakistan do now to make sure that there is a ceasefire and that the talks do go forward, because that is the only way?
Let me say something. We
please go
share
ahead.
the common border with Afghanistan. That is not only thing. We share the mountains, river, religion, and above all, we share the common fate. The fate of Afghanistan is linked with the Pakistan, and fate of Pakistan is linked with the Afghanistan. We have to cooperate. We have to live together. We are the neighbor, not by choice. It's naturally we are neighbor, and we have to trust each other. Of course, during last 2 decades, there was mistrust. There was some unhappy moments, but we can consider that Afghanistan was under the foreign occupation, or the foreign troops were there. There was huge Indian influence, so some mistrust was created. It was deliberately created, either by American or by Israelis or by Indians. So whatsoever the reason, there were some people inside Afghanistan who was not happy with Pakistan. But the common people in Afghanistan, they are still brothers with Pakistan, and Pakistan is very sincere with Afghanistan. Pakistan
Sure,
will
but
put
you see, we did hear the Ashraf Ghani is speaking about the fact that the mistrust between the two countries is something that we need to work on, and that has come out as a major statement that he's given at the moment. And it seems to me also that currently Pakistan's role as a facilitator in the Afghan peace process is also extremely important. But at the same time, Pakistan developing its relations with Afghanistan is really going to not just facilitate that, but also help with the regional peace and security. So how do we move forward with that? That's a real issue.
Pakistan is in a position that we can help a lot. Even that the trust we can restore, because there will be no longer the foreign intervention in Afghanistan or foreign influence in Afghanistan. So we can communicate with each other, and we can normalize the relation or restore the trust. And furthermore,
But doesn't Indian influence still remain? They're still trying to destabilize the process.
it will remove gradually.
Okay.
It will remove gradually. Of course, it is not overnight, but once the foreign troops are evacuating from Afghanistan, of course, the situation will change completely.
Okay, Mr. Sarfraz, we know that the Prime Minister has said that he's going to do everything in his capacity to make sure that the intra-Afghan dialogue goes forward, and that we move towards an end of a ceasefire of the hostilities that have been going on, that have actually in fact escalated after what we've been relying so much on, which is the intra-Afghan dialogue, to move things forward. When the Prime Minister says that Pakistan will be able to do everything it can, what more is there, what options are there for Pakistan to actually be able to achieve that? We have reached this level so far and played a huge role at the moment, but what is next?
I think, yes, you're absolutely right in highlighting that, that the bridging the gap in trust is the first step to move forward.
But how?
Of course, there are, if you look at the things, okay, we have some differences, but I think we have more things in common. We definitely have culture in common. We have, we have religion in common. We have And most important thing that both countries are struggling in terms of economy, and both needs a better economy. And there is another motivator for Pakistan and Afghanistan, which is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. So I think Pakistan can, take the advantage of these things, because, of course, Afghanistan needs a better economy. They really want to feed their people, and Pakistan also struggling with economy for a long time now. So I think these are some things in common between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and they can move forward. And if there are differences, but at the same time, there are more motivators and more things in common between between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
And how do we also work on our border issues?
I think Pakistan has been working on border issues, and especially, you see, there is fencing thing. Pakistan is trying to protect its border and safeguard, and I think major portion of the border is being already protected. I think more than 80% border is protected, and it's been safeguarded already. So I think Pakistan has been doing everything, but at the same time, Sana, we need to understand that Pakistan also has limits. Like, Pakistan's foreign policy also has limits. And so, there is a point where Pakistan's struggle, Pakistan's sincere efforts get exhausted, right? Because they think that, Pakistan has absolute influence over Taliban, but it is not the case.
Of course.
Pakistan has some influence over Taliban. So this is something which Afghanistan needs to understand, and which is very important.
Right. Mr. Lodhi, what would you like to say in terms of our efforts of building trust with Afghanistan's leadership? We know, as you mentioned earlier, there have been visits by high officials to Pakistan recently, and the Prime Minister himself has made his first visit to the country. And there are efforts underway still to making sure that this mistrust disappears, but it still exists. How do we move forward with this?
I think the first thing to understand is that Pakistan today is not one consolidated country. And once we say, as you said, Afghan leadership, it does not mean only Afghan government. Afghan leadership is divided into a number of factions, and we know that the main stakeholders today are Afghan Taliban, whether we like it or not. They control most of the areas, and they are the ones who have been talking to Americans, and they are the ones who may or may not talk to the Afghan government. So they are rather the most important element in Afghanistan are Afghan Taliban. So once you say that talking to Afghan leadership, it doesn't mean talking to Ashraf Ghani. He is just one of the leaders, one of the many leaders. And let me add, not a very strong leader at the moment. And the future is also not bright as far as Ashraf Ghani is concerned. So we need to talk to a lot of Afghan leaders. And as I said, that we have been doing it. But I would have been much happier if during his visit to Kabul, Prime Minister could have also, met Abdullah and also other leaders of other factions. Anyway, after having said that, two other factors I think which we have not done enough. One is we have not leveraged our position vis-a-vis Afghanistan. I mean, whatever we were doing for the world, for the Americans, in return, we could have asked them certain things which we have not really been succeeded in doing that. The third thing is, as my brother was saying, Pakistan alone is not in a position to bring out peace in Afghanistan. Peace has to be brought by the Afghans themselves, but we can help them, and that is possible only if we also add more countries in this effort, like China, like Russia, like Iran, which is very important. So these four countries which I have just named, along with Afghan people and Afghan leadership, and once I said Afghan leadership, I've made it very clear what I mean by Afghan leadership. All these people must get together, and this vacuum which people are fearing, that after Americans leave there will be a vacuum, there will be no vacuum this time, because last time one superpower was defeated, the other superpower left, then there was a vacuum. Now China is interested in Afghan peace, Russia is interested, Iran is interested, Pakistan is interested, and above all, the people of Afghanistan are interested. So it is not a vacuum like that. It is not a similar situation as some people would like to paint.
Sure.
I think American forces will have to leave. They have no choice. And in my humble opinion, they are not much interested in the peace of Afghanistan after they leave. They are only interested as long as they are here and they want to live peacefully. So the remaining task will have to be performed by the group of entities which I just named.
Right, and considering the fact that the US withdrawal of troops In a recent announcement by the US, seems to be that by mid-Jan, we know that from about 4,500 troops, it's going to be cut down to 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. And we know that the NATO chief has expressed his own concerns regarding this, considering the fact that they've spent such a long time in Afghanistan that right at the end, if they do a hasty withdrawal, it's going to be problematic. Do you think that this is going to be problematic, the fact that 2,000 troops have been are going to be cut down in 2 months, considering the fact that we don't see a tangible future at the moment of the intra-Afghan dialogue, it's not going forward. Do you think this is a hasty withdrawal by the US?
I would I would not say it whether hasty or sluggish or whatever it is, because I said earlier also they are not going by choice. They are going because of certain pressures, and we must try to understand that. Secondly, Afghan Taliban have they are very well adhered to the pact which was between America and Afghan Taliban. They have not carried out any actions against the allied forces so far. So one should not take it that if Americans or one side, violates that treaty, what is going to be the reaction from the other side? Just one common sense thing, and which everybody can understand, that if 150,000 strong troops could not overcome Afghan Taliban, 2,500 will never be able to do that. So simple.
But sir, my question
straight.
is that the impact it's going to have on the Afghan peace process, considering the fact that the hostilities are on the rise, don't you think that this is going to be negatively influencing the intra-Afghan dialogue that's going on?
We must try to understand that what type of hostilities are on the rise. One that, ISIL, Khorasan, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and some other entities, they have become active within Afghanistan, and of course, across our border also. So the level of violence which you see nowadays is either between Afghan Taliban and Afghan government, or the entities which I've just named. There's no violence between US troops and Afghan Taliban. So,
But will they not
Americans,
act as a deterrent?
Right. So actually, the thing is that they are not in a position to violate that treaty which they have signed with Afghan Taliban, and Afghan
Right.
Taliban are waiting for the Americans to leave. Once they leave, you will see a different Afghan Taliban, and then these things will be sorted out that we are talking about. It has to be sequential. If Americans think that they will stay here till there is intra-Afghan dialogue, they are mistaken. That will not happen. Intra-Afghan dialogue will only take place once Americans leave, and the four powers which I just mentioned, they will have to act, and they will have to facilitate intra-Afghan dialogue and everything later on.
Right. Mr. Zamir, how do you see this process of the fact that the intra-Afghan dialogue is only going to see a more successful, tangible resolution coming forward after the US withdrawal? How do you see the US withdrawal going on simultaneously, before or after we actually see a framework of policy going forward with the Afghanistan leadership?
In fact, Afghanistan was a tribal society, and historically they were fighting with each other. The stronger will be the survivor only. I think that there will be some violence for some time, but the intra-Afghan dialogue will overcome all these things with the passage of time, and there will be a stable Afghanistan. Once there is no intervention of the foreign forces, they can decide their future by themselves.
Right, and we also know, of course, that when the Prime Minister was talking about in his visit to Afghanistan, he also mentioned the fact that he wants to move towards a ceasefire of hostilities and make sure that that happens. Mr. Sarfraz, considering the fact that we know that Prime Minister Imran Khan in Pakistan has played this role of facilitator because of their relationship with the Taliban, do you think that currently at the moment we can actually make this happen, that we move towards a cessation of hostilities and help the intra-Afghan dialogue go forward? Or do you think this is too much to ask for from the Taliban?
Like as I earlier said, that Pakistani foreign policy, and Pakistan has, as Pakistan keeps saying, that we have some influence, not the absolute influence over Taliban. So Pakistan also has limits to facilitate the intra-Afghan peace process. So it is not something that depends absolutely and completely on Pakistan, that Pakistan is going to determine what is going to happen, our probably what is going to be the future of Afghanistan. It is, of course, the Afghanistan and the main stakeholder in Afghanistan who are going to determine the future of Afghanistan, that what is going to be the future of Afghanistan.
Right, and but what about Pakistan's role as a facilitator or mediator in the process? Does it end here?
I think yes, Pakistan can play, or Pakistan can push Taliban towards the, to achieve some sort of peace dialogue with the Afghan government, and again there are limits.
Of course. And another thing, Mr. Lodhi, that you pointed out, of course, when we see and consider fairly enough that every country will have its limits when they're interacting or playing a role as a mediator or facilitator, you also mentioned the importance of regional partners and mentioned a number of countries who can play their role in this regard. How much do you think that Pakistan is currently engaging regional partners into playing this role along with it as a facilitator and supporting the Afghan peace process to go forward? Are we engaging with the regional partners?
Yes, I think we are doing that, and we have talked about the four China, Russia, Pakistan, and Iran. There were certain meetings earlier also, but it seems to me that they will become more active after Americans leave, because America does not want to be straight to involve Russia or to involve Iran as far as Pakistan is concerned about Afghanistan. But that is their desire, which probably cannot be fulfilled, because there can be no peace in Afghanistan unless Iran also joins the talks, and other Central Asian neighbors, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, they also have to be facilitators, and I think that will happen. If you remember that about 2 years and 1.5 years before, the Taliban and many other stakeholders in Afghanistan were called at Moscow. There have been 2 meetings at Moscow, and in one of the meetings there were 100 of them, at least 99 to 100, leaders from various factions, including Karzai and certain women leaders and all that. And Russians were also trying to, make a platform where they can talk to each other. So there are certain platforms which have not come to the fore, which are not very obvious at this moment. But I am sure that there are other countries taking interest because it is, right. Okay.
Okay, we'll quickly touch upon Iran also because we're running out of time. You mentioned, of course, the fact that we can engage Iran in this process, and Iran seems to be interested in doing so as well, considering we had the Iranian special envoy in Afghanistan in Pakistan, and later on he visited Afghanistan as well. And we know that Pakistan and Iran have similar perspectives on Afghanistan. But the question remains for Pakistan is to be able to strike that balance, considering the fact that we have a relationship with the United States and with Saudi Arabia. Even though Iran seems to be hopeful in a post-Trump era that things would be different, how would you see the future for Pakistan to be able to simultaneously also engage its regional partners, maintain friendly neighborly relations, and also strike a balance with our relationship with the US and Saudi Arabia?
All right. I think the first thing is that Iran and Pakistan must learn their lessons. What happened the last time Americans left and Russians were defeated. There was a proxy war where both the countries had their favorites, and they kept on fighting for such a long time. There was so much fratricide in Afghanistan. That was a very bad episode. The sole purpose of diplomacy is to create the sort of balance which you are talking about. Balance between relations of opposing entities. You talked about Saudi Arabia and Iran. They have a lot of problems. We know it. And we are okay. We are not big enough or not in a position to really carry out any role for the time being. But at least our diplomacy so far has played all right, that we have working relations with both of them, a more deeper relation with one and working relation with the other. Probably we need to have more deeper relations with Iran also. Similar is the case with America, because just we can give this example to Americans, that if we were not there, how would you talk to Taliban? And how could you talk to even China before, we became the bridge between China and America once, we all know it. And then now we are becoming a bridge between Taliban and Americans. So why not that we can also become a bridge between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and also America and Iran. So I think our diplomacy at times has been brilliant. And we must acknowledge our diplomats. They are one of the best in the world. So I think we should continue doing that. And instead of taking sides, we should play neutral, but
Right.
looking after our own interest. And we should not allow any country to take us for granted and start dictating us certain things or doing things within our country which are negative in nature. So
Right, absolutely.
we need
Mr.
to tread a
Sameer,
very
considering
balanced
the
approach.
fact that, of course, it remains to be seen whether or not things are going to be different for Iran in a post-Trump era, but we know that the recent visit by the Iranian foreign minister, there have been visits in the past as well, emphasizes on their neighbor-first policy, and they've also emphasized the fact that whatever the outside forces sides are, neighbors are going to stay the same, whether or not whatever relationship you have with the rest of the world. Considering this and the fact that Pakistan also needs to strike this balance that we were earlier talking about, how does Pakistan proceed forward with the relationship with Iran, and can Pakistan actually play a role of a mediator, facilitator, as it has done in the past in Afghanistan with the US or Iran or Saudi Arabia?
The geopolitics in this region are changing very rapidly, and I can see that there will be improvement between relation Iran and Pakistan. Pakistan will play the role of facilitator in the whole region, not only between Iran and the Arab world, but within the region, Pakistan will have a better place to play the role. And our foreign policy is very balanced now and moving in the right direction. The days to come, we see good news from all sides.
Mr. Sarfaraz, how would you review the entire spectrum of Pakistan's foreign policy options, considering all our regional partners and, of course, the balances that we need to strike with China, India, Iran, Afghanistan, and the US as well, and to take forward two really important issues that we face in terms of our threats of security, both from Afghanistan and the Indian side?
In hindsight, Pakistan proved to be very bad at achieving the diplomatic equilibrium, right? And Pakistan lost its diplomatic balance between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan was not even able to, at some point was able to protect the national interest of Pakistan. But right now, what we have seen, the growing natural tendencies in this region, especially vis-a-vis Iran, is concerned that that Pakistan, Iran, China, Turkey, right, they are coming on the same page. And mainly, you see, there was a conventional and traditional blocks in Muslim world. Now even Muslim Sunni world is divided. Now one block is divided by Turkey and the other divide is divided by led by Saudi Arabia. So I think Pakistan, Turkey, Iran, by living in this region, they have much to achieve, in terms of geopolitics. So yes, Pakistan, for the first time, if not for the first time, I mean that it is high time for Pakistan that Pakistan has been, following the right approach and going in the right direction.
Okay, Mr. Lodhi, my last question is to you. With the way forward in our foreign policy options, what do you see Pakistan needing to do in the first place, in the most immediate terms, and then in the longer term as well, both in terms of Afghanistan and India?
I think about India, we should try to, although it may not work, but we must try to appeal to their better sense, especially to the Indian society, that we cannot, put the future of 1.5 billion people just on the altar of certain leaders that they want from the Indian side, that whatever they are doing, we must try that. But the main thing which we must understand is that geoeconomy, geopolitics, and geostrategy, these are intertwined and they have to be applied simultaneously. What at times I feel is that in our policies, we at times try only geopolitics or only geostrategy or only geoeconomy. So these are all intermingled. Unless we do well in geostrategy and geopolitics, our economy is also not likely to improve. So the moment we understand this and work in all these three fields, I think we will meet great successes. We have great potentials.
I would like to add something.
Yes, please.
The last point. Pakistan, first of all, Pakistan needs to understand that Pakistan needs to come out of this Indian-centric foreign policy, because Pakistan's foreign policy has been arrested in the past, has been arrested by the Indian, phobia and Indian-centric, number one. Number two, Pakistan has to chalk out its own political and strategic objectives. And as General Lodi said, that, it is very important that economy is prerequisite. If you really want to get prosper in the world, so of course, without economy, you are not going to survive.
Absolutely. And of course, the fact that we are able to establish better economic relations with Afghanistan would also help with the mistrust there.
And we have a BRI and CPAC framework is right
exactly. There. Absolutely. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Rodi. Thank you very much, Professor Zamir Ahmed Awan. And thank you very much, Sarfraz Ahmed Rana, for joining us today and being part of the discussion of the foreign policy initiatives and options of Pakistan and the way forward, considering, of course, the recent developments. At the end of the day, what is most important for Pakistan is to be able to strike a balance, not just with our relationship with our regional partners and our neighbors, but also with our international community members, including the US, and also, of course, make sure that our security interests are also taken into account for. Thank you very much for watching. That's all for now. It's goodbye.